Good evening, I'm Norman DePoe. With me are Major General H.A. Sparling, the General Officer commanding the Army's Central Command, and Mr. John Wallace, the Deputy Director of the Federal Emergency Measures Organization. Later in this program, they'll be telling us about Canada's preparations for civil defense. For the past 7 days, John McCallum, his wife, and his 2 children have been living in a fallout shelter under simulated post-attack conditions. In a few minutes, they'll be coming out of the shelter to tell us about their experiences. Those 2 stories in a moment. Meanwhile, we have some revealing information on what the Soviet Union is doing to protect its population in the event of nuclear war. The material has been provided to us by government officials in Ottawa, by NBC's Moscow correspondent John Rich, and by Dr. Leon Gur. He's an expert on Russian civil defense attached to the RAND Corporation in California. As you may know, this is a private, non-profit research corporation working under contract with the United States Air Force. Well, in Canada and the United States, civil defense is a full-time occupation for a relatively few professionals. It's a part-time volunteer operation for another relative handful of people, and little more than a nasty word to the bulk of the population. And incidentally, some of the population is behind me here. There is a Ban the Bomb demonstration going on outside our studios. In the Soviet Union, civil defense has become very much a part of the average citizen's life. Up to 85% of all Russian adults have received some degree of civil defense training. That's an estimated 80 million people in all. Throughout the Soviet Union, civil defense has been made compulsory for all but the very old, the very young, the sick, and the infirm. In residential districts, for instance, so-called self-defense groups have been formed to meet any war emergency. They consist of teams with specialized training in firefighting, organization, rescue work, decontamination, medical assistance, and shelter administration. There is said to be enough shelter accommodation for a substantial proportion of the population in major Soviet centers. In recent months, Soviet civil defense planners have been putting considerable stress on pre-attack evacuation of the bigger cities. That's apparently a new departure in Russian policy. Between 5 and 10 million protective suits have already been distributed, as well as millions of gas masks. And in general, though Soviet civil defense is not yet believed to be fully prepared to meet war conditions, progress is reported to be greater than that of any other major power. It's estimated that the Soviet Union this year alone has spent $200 million on civil defense instruction. Well, that's the picture there. Here outside our Toronto studios, the picture is that John McCallum and his wife and their 2 children for the past 7 days have been living in a fallout shelter. In a few minutes, they'll be coming out. There's quite a welcoming committee here to greet them. As I said, there are between 70 and 100 Ban the Bombers. They've been parading up and down here for the past half hour or so. And their signs, some of them say, "We don't want shelters, we want homes. Bricks cannot stop bombs." They apparently intend to continue here throughout this program. But now it is time to welcome the McCallums after their week in the shelter. We'll just knock on the door and see if there's anybody home. And here they are, the McCallum family, after 7 days in a fallout shelter. Hello, Karen. Well, some people apparently don't like the idea of welcoming the McCallums, but here is Mayor Nathan Phillips of Toronto and Mrs. Phillips. They certainly want to welcome them.
Well, I'm very happy to welcome you, young lady. Congratulations, you're doing all right.
I do, sir.
How do you feel? All right?
Wonderful. That's
Oh,
wonderful.
dear. Did you enjoy it, dear?
She's
Did you?
a
You
nice
look
girlie.
wonderful. The
Well-
children look marvelous.
Well, John, I suppose it's superfluous to suggest that you're glad it's all over, is it?
Yes, it is, Norman, but I must say that not only did we survive, but if you look at the children, I think you'd agree that we thrived.
They certainly look happy and healthy. How about you, Mrs. McCallum? Are you
Fine.
still? Could we turn around, let people have a look at you? Camera's in there today.
Roger.
Roger, do you want to come around? What did you do inside, Roger?
I was making things out of things that look like jacks, but they're not jacks.
How about you, Karen? What did you do?
I did
Sewing.
some sewing
Mm-hmm.
and some knitting the first day.
What did you do all the other days, though, Karen? Tell Mr. DePoe.
And I did some catty's tail.
Uh-huh. You seem to have kept pretty busy. John, how did the educational side of your project go, giving the children their lessons?
Well, it was so hot on Monday we couldn't do any schoolwork, and we started it on Tuesday and we finished it yesterday. I think the teachers will be very pleased that they've done the lot.
They've done their full week
They've
school.
done a full week schooling, yeah.
There's, as you see, a welcoming committee here for you. They have a petition. Do you feel inclined to sign it after your week in the shelter?
Well, I think we would certainly consider it because I hope no one ever has to live in one of these things.
Well, we'll talk to the McCallum family again in a little while. And children, if you want to go into the studio, I think you'll find that we've got some things for you for being such good kids for this past week. Yes.
Thank you, Norm.
We'll talk to the McCallum family, as I said, a little later. Meanwhile, let's take a look at what nuclear war might mean to a city like Toronto. Most civil defense officials here are of the opinion that Toronto itself would not be a direct target in the event of a direct attack, at least not in the initial stages of any new war. More likely, they say, Canada's second largest city would find itself in the path of massive and dangerous fallout clouds sweeping up from prime target areas laid waste in the United States. J.H. Pollard, the EMO coordinator for Metropolitan Toronto, discussed that situation with Jack McBeth.
Say that an attack was carried out on a target area in the United States near the border. What could we expect in Toronto?
If the prevailing wind condition were of such a nature as to bring radioactive condition north here, we might, for instance, if a strike occurred in northern New York State, expect evidence of radioactivity in possibly good intensity within a couple of hours.
Now, you have a chart here showing the possible effects of a 5-megaton bomb. Could you explain this to us?
Yes, this is not necessarily representing an actual condition or an anticipated condition, rather a theory condition to give you an idea of what can happen with a bomb of this nature bursting near the surface in the downtown area. Destruction is absolute for 3 to 4 miles. At about 6 miles, will be the end of the rubble line. It'll be beyond that point no one can enter without removal of rubble. Up to 8 miles, there will be complete destruction with some buildings standing but no longer usable. Beyond that, out to the 11-mile area, some element of repair may make buildings habitable again. As well as this, there is a degree of burn condition that lessens as you move out.
You're talking here in terms of a 5-megaton bomb. That's not one of the real big ones, is it?
No, it's not the biggest known, but as I understand this, there's a question of feasibility, and under some circumstances, the delivery weapon and so on, it may be that 5 megaton is the one that we should be considering for our studies.
How serious a problem in Toronto is public apathy?
I think up till a short time ago, public apathy was a great consideration, but this is no longer the case. There is a very definite growing public concern and an intelligent interest in what can be done, what steps can be taken in the home, and so on. Our volume of inquiry here has increased actually 100-fold in the last month or month and a half.
Blast and fallout, the killing and maiming agents of a nuclear war. But we can survive. The Emergency Measures Organization says we can take 11 steps to aid that survival. Step 1, know the effects of nuclear explosions. A nuclear explosion releases vast amounts of energy in 3 forms: light and heat, blast, and radiation. Step 2, know the facts about radioactive fallout. There are 4 things that determine the amount of radiation reaching your body from fallout. They are, first, the time that has passed since the explosion; second, the length of time you're exposed to fallout; third, the distance you are from the fallout; and fourth, the shielding between you and the fallout. Step 3, know the warning signals and have a battery-powered radio. The alert signal is a steady note on the sirens for 3 minutes or more. The signal to take cover would be a rising and falling note on the sirens, again for 3 minutes or more. The all clear would be announced only on your radio. and not by the use of sirens. Step 4, have a shelter. Or if you can't have a shelter, at least some type of improvised protection. You can, in fact, use any suitable heavy object in your house to block basement windows, including banking up earth against them. Step number 5, have 14 days of emergency supplies. Lists are available from your EMO authorities. Step 6, know how to prevent and how to fight fires. And, of course, you should have a fire extinguisher. Step number 7, know first aid and home nursing. Step number 8 is also important, know emergency cleanliness. And step number 9, know how to get rid of radioactive dust. Step number 10 is another big one. What does your municipal authority want you to do in local emergency operations? In other words, know your municipal plan. And finally, step number 11, have a plan for you and your family. This EMO booklet says in conclusion that your family survival will be based on having a shelter or an evacuation plan, knowing the warning signals, knowing what you and your family are to do when an alert is sounded, having a battery-operated radio, water, and food, and assigning each member of your own family a job in putting your own plan into action. Well, the McCullum family has just done this for 7 long days, and I guess they have been long days. You've had a taste of life as it might be under these circumstances. Are you convinced now that you could survive the real thing?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How did you get along? Oh, incidentally, before I go any farther, for 2 kids who have done a pretty good job, Roger
Thank you.
and Karen, a doll, and for Mrs. McCullum, something that you probably haven't seen too much of in the last 7 days.
Thank you very much.
And there's lemonade and cookies here for the children if you want to go right ahead.
Would you like some lemonade, Roger?
I've already had some.
Karen, would you like some?
No.
No? No?
How did you make out in the housekeeping department, Mrs. McCullum? Was the stock of food that you took in, did it turn out to be suitable, or was it the right kind of thing?
Yes, yes. Well, we, you go and get them in there. Yes, well, of course, there wasn't much, too much cooking to be done. Everything was in a can. And, well, it was adequate.
John, did you eat well?
Well, we ate very well, and now we're sort of connoisseurs of various brands of canned food. Everything came out of a can. We haven't had any fresh food at all. As a matter of fact, just this moment, I see you have oranges and bananas there, and I think these are the sort of things that the children will need the most. Although everything was very well, or most of the things had added vitamins in them, and these are very good things to have these are very good things to have in your shelter. Now we had, we were lacking in what vitamin? Vitamin A, wasn't it, you said?
Oh, I suppose so.
I think it was vitamin
Yes,
A,
it
but my wife says that we can survive for the period of a shelter,
Was there anything that you took in that turned out to be superfluous, or on the other hand, anything that you wished you had thought of taking in with you?
We had too much milk, too much powdered milk. We thought in terms of pounds rather than in terms of quarts, so it ended up that we had
We had more than twice as much as we needed.
55
More than
quarts.
twice as much
Yes,
milk as you needed. Well, that's lesson number 1, perhaps. Hey, brief chat with the McCullums after a week in a simulated shelter. Now, let's visit a Toronto lady who's among the hundreds of people in this city who have in fact built real ones. Mrs. Patricia Strom talks with Jack Macbeth in her basement shelter.
You'll ask a question, Jack. Mrs. Strom, you're raising 3 children here on your own, and apparently you don't have an awful lot of money. How did you, do you think this was much of a sacrifice to build a shelter?
Well, I consider in this case it shouldn't be considered a sacrifice. I don't have much money, but I borrowed the money from my daughter, and I feel that if people can afford television and cars, in a case of absolute necessity, they could afford this.
What has been the reaction of the neighbors? Do they know that you've got a shelter here?
Oh, yes. I imagine some are skeptical and others probably would like it, but I haven't heard anything much about what they're going to do.
If an attack ever did happen here in Toronto, and they tried to get in, what would you do?
Well, I hope to have a good, strong door. I would imagine I would take in as many as I could, but I mean, it's only large enough to take in so many. The rest would be impossible.
It seems to be a little cramped. Is this the normal size for shelter of this type?
I don't know about too many others, but I imagine a good deal depends on the size of your basement. Ours is rather low.
When you decided to build a shelter, how'd you go about it?
Well, I phoned Civil Defense, and they told me that any reputable dealer could build one according to government specifications. So I got in touch with Federal Stone, and they made all the necessary arrangements.
Do you mind my asking how much it cost?
$575.
Mrs. Strom, you're pretty well stocked here. Do you propose to spend a week or something like that down here with your children?
Well, I don't have too much time, but I will try. If you read the survival booklets issued by the government, they advise you of all the different things to prepare and do. And I imagine entertainment has a great deal to do with it. But I don't suppose it would be pleasant. But in this case, I don't think you have much choice in the matter.